Hello, my friends. Welcome once again to Kardec Radio. Yeah, it's Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We're here every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time with our program, Spiritism, A Closer Look. I'm Luiz Lima, your host, directly from Central Florida. Well, tonight we have a special program. Tonight we are going to take a closer look at resignation. Oh my God! What a vast subject. We can be speaking for hours and hours. So, in order to be more objective, I need help, and I need a great deal of help. So, I'm gonna call the one and only who's gonna help me tonight. Her name is Palloma Peterson. Palloma, how are you?
Hi, Luis. Thank you so much for having me at the program. I'm smiling because I was laughing at the introduction. You are right. The theme of resignation, there's a lot for us to think, but especially meditate and like our inner reflection on resignation, right? There's
Correct.
a lot.
And I think there's a lot of information, literature in general, spiritist literature on the subject, but a lot of times it's just hidden.
Yes.
It's not. For example, you open a book and there's a chapter called resignation. It's usually it's not like this. It's based on comments and history and information in general that leads us to understand what resignation is. And I think we need to just maybe make it clear to the public, you that are following, you who are following us here, either live or not. The word resignation in English has several meanings, more than one meaning. So I think we need to be clear on what the purpose here is for tonight's closer look. We are gonna work with the word resignation in the meaning of acceptance, surrender, anything in that line, because the word resignation has other meanings, but those are not the ones we are gonna address today. So, would you agree with that, Paloma? Do you think it's
That's correct. Yes, Luis. So, a good example, as you mentioned before, is this is not about resigning to your job, right? You resign to your boss and you quit your job. That's not the situation. What we're talking about here is our resignation to the divine laws, and and it's much deeper the meaning than we're used to. So we're going to bring the discussion thinking of the Spiritism take on resignation. So we're going to go look for wonderful texts from Paul
oh
Stephen, because it is our favorite book, at least it's mine. And then the Gospel According to Spiritism, that really teaches us the meaning of resignation.
right, this one?
That's the one.
So we got the right weapons today, I think, right?
Yeah.
All right. How can we start? Resignation is such a vast topic. How do we start?
Yeah. So I would love for us to start with Paul and Stephen. And the reason is we need to have a model of resignation, right? What is resignation? What is to resign to the divine laws? So before we go there, let's think of a model. So Paul and Stephen took 8 months for Chico Xavier to psychograph this. Imagine that. This is huge book, 8 months, every day writing about this. Chico Xavier's favorite book. And we understand why. When we look at Stephen, right from the beginning, and I have to pull the text because I could never quote a manual as well as it's written. So if we remember the story, Stephen was Jeziel. His father has a disagreement with the Romans, gets really upset, burns some farmland, comes home, and things are going really bad because the Romans are not going to let it go. And now his father is desperate. And we're talking about a family that grew up knowing the law. They studied it. They discussed as a family. And the father comes completely distraught. And this is Jeziel to his father as an example of resignation for us. He says, Father, why are you so frightened? God is never short of compassion. The sacred writings teach us that before anything else, he is the zealous father of all the downtrodden of the earth. This is Stephen Jeziel resignation on the situation that is so daring that they know something will happen physically. The Romans are going to come and it's going to take everything away.
Right.
And here is Jeziel so resigned to God, saying, Father, why are you so concerned? God is with us. And this is the example that we're discussing here of resignation. Stephen, the story continues and it gets really, it's a harsh situation. They go to jail. Stephen, Abigail, his father. Stephen is actually sold as a slave.
Yeah.
He ends up many times after with Peter at the mansion, and then faced Saul. On his last moments, he's there with Saul and Abigail. And we have another example for us at that moment when he tells Abigail that he blesses their relationship. Another example of resignation to us. He knew God's plan. And that's what we're bringing here, Luis, this true resignation. So what is to resign to the divine laws? Is it for us to sit and stay quiet and say, okay, fine, whatever it is, right? What do we think resignation is when we are acting according to God's law?
Yeah, a lot of times we tend to think that resignation is just what you said, like this, I'm not going to I don't need to do anything. I'm just going to stay quiet here on my corner and things are going to happen and that's it. But that's not what it really is, because, it requires some action, some sort of action, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's when we go back to the gospel according to Spiritism, where it says that obedience and resignation are two very active companion of virtues of meekness. And then he's talking a little bit more. For us to highlight active. So when we are resigned to God, it doesn't mean that we just stay passive and we are quiet and we don't argue and then we don't say anything. But inside of us, we're actually questioning everything. Inside of us, we don't think God has a plan, or we don't trust and we're lacking faith. That's not resignation. True resignation is very active, which brings us back to Paul and Stephen, especially Paul, because we know now what Saul did. He had to transform himself. Did he stay on the blame game and like, oh my God, I screwed up everything and now? No.
That's exactly what he didn't do.
Exactly. He said on the road to Damascus, he saw Jesus. He asked Jesus, what do you want from me? And he accepted it. Resignation. Okay, God, got the message. I will go to Damascus and I will change it all. And he was so active from then on. I mean, Paul was so active that all the things we have documentation, a lot of it came from him. His letters, his travels, his work were benefiting today from what he did back then.
Mm-hmm.
It is quite incredible how much he did really, really, really align himself with Jesus at that point. We know he already trusted God. He knew his connection to God. He was just on a deviation path, right? He was just, he took a wrong turn and came back.
Came back, and he did it in a very short time, by the way. Right?
Which tells us that we can all do it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we don't need to wait for another reincarnation.
We don't. I think a lot of us, if not most of us, we see the story, Saul becoming Paul, the whole story, we see as if Damascus is a destination. He went to Damascus. We put a lot of emphasis. He went to Damascus. He went to, when he got there, then Damascus is not a destination. Damascus is a starting point. You go to Damascus to start your journey. So the idea that I'm going to, in quote, right, metaphor, I'm going to go to Damascus. You're going to go there to start the journey. That's what he did. He started there. Damascus is not a destination, it's just a turning point in our lives. It could be if we decide to do so.
Absolutely. I like thinking when we read and reread Paul and Stephen, I like thinking that I am on the road to Damascus.
Mm-hmm.
And what is Jesus asking me? Because if we're reading this book, and the mentors of the Spiritism Society of Virginia tells us to study and read it all the time. They just told us, like, Christmas break, so let's study more. Reread Paul and Stephen. And they are asking us to go back to the road and think about it. What is Jesus calling us to do? And align ourselves with the plan, resign to the plans. Are we feeling it in our hearts, the plan? But it's the active, right? The active part of the resignation. Mm-hmm. Not just like, oh yeah, okay. I've read the book. Thank you, mentors.
That doesn't do anything. That's just being passive without any gain or any, improvement.
Yeah. And I think, Luiz, when we're talking about resignation, I think it's also important for us to highlight the difference between resignation and indifference.
Yeah, sure.
And when we talk about indifference, we're talking about the moral indifference, right? Mm-hmm. Is when we look at people and we might say, that person, we see their suffering, whatever it is, and we say, oh, God wanted that for that person. And we say, so I won't help. It's just, God's plan. I'm resigned to God's plan. Yeah. It's so twisted, our minds, but that's how we think. That's God's plan, and so I'm not going to help. And that's what it is. But that is not resignation. We tend to say it's resignation, but in reality, it's moral indifference.
Right.
And if we study the gospel, yes, we understand that we all will have our trials. We were going to have to go through them, whatever trials and expiation, fair enough. But on the other hand, it doesn't say there that we shouldn't help others. It says the very opposite.
Yeah.
So resigning to God means helping at all times, not just, when we see people, we really need to see them. Mm-hmm. Even if we think we're doing something good, which is interesting, right? We might say, oh, but I give so much. But do we feel that we are giving, or it's just like, blah, it's just, a couple dollars. It's a jacket. It's all about our intention. So when we read Paul and Stephen, the intention of Stephen and Paul is so clear. They really wanted to walk the talk.
Mm-hmm.
And they did it.
He did it. Yeah, the whole transformation that he had to go through. It's very interesting because you see, when Jesus comes to him and tells him, "Why are why are you after me?" We do this every day.
Yes.
We put Jesus on the cross every day by practicing our vices. I mean, in a small proportion, we are doing this every single day almost, because when we, all of these vices, being aggressive with somebody or whatever, telling lies to somebody, whatever it is, we are going against what he taught. So we are going against him. So the phrase applies,
Correct.
which is, why are you doing this to me? So we are putting him on the cross in a small scale, unfortunately.
Yes. Hopefully not for long.
Not for long.
Hopefully we're here, we're studying together, we are meditating, and we'll be able to make, changes to even if it's small changes every day, make it a little bit better. Well, what Chico said was that Stephen and Abigail, after their their discarnation, they went straight to Jesus. Like they went to work in the higher realms and they never had to reincarnate again.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine that ascension. I mean, it's just shoot up to the stars. They went all the way up.
Yeah.
And not only that, but they were working to help Paul fulfills his reincarnatory plan. But Paul had to reincarnate many times again and again to make sure that, the work was complete. And
Right.
it's very interesting that all the commotion, the violence that he caused as Saul, he suffered himself afterwards.
Yeah.
And he understood it.
That was the purpose. I think you were talking about suffering a few minutes ago. And in the gospel, there's a beautiful passage from St. Augustine where he says, "Suffer well." And the first time that I read this, I go, am I understand this correctly? What do you mean by suffer well? And that's exactly what it is. Well, in the sense that you're gonna have to go through it anyway, regardless. You're gonna have to offset the wrongdoing. So this will happen. Once it's happening, let me make the best out of it, so I do not incur into the same mistake, because I'm gonna then have to go through the same process again. That's the suffer well. And I think it had a when Saul, right, understood that, he said, I'm suffering now, but let me suffer one time, get this thing done and right. So he suffered well,
Yes.
using St. Augustine's words.
Yeah, and that's perfect. And it made me think of Leon Denis, because Leon Denis also addresses pain and how we approach pain, so call it suffering, well.
Right.
And he tells us that it's all how we perceive it. And we can look at trials and expiations as something that is, a punishment, or we can look at as Paul did. He resigned to it, and it is what it is. It's God's plan, and I'm going to do it. Nobody's saying it's easy, Nobody's saying that there won't be physical pain and, ailments and diseases. But the way he perceived it, it was an ascension. He was doing better. It was progress. He
Mhm.
conquered it. It wasn't God's punishment, which is also Stephen's approach. I mean, Stephen, at his last moments, he was being beaten and slashed and maybe even rocks thrown at him, ordered by Saul. And he describes that, well, Saul was getting angry because Stephen was so calm despite all the pain. He was calm.
Mhm.
And that is our example of suffer well, or change the way you perceive the situation. And but it's hard. Only these very advanced spirits, demonstrating to us, we can have a picture. But it is hard. Don't get me wrong, that I don't think we're close to Paul or Stephen at all. We're in the pandemic, working from home, but we have a home, we have a job, and people are complaining.
Yeah, and when we complain, you know, we are complainers by nature, because before the pandemic, we used to complain about certain things. Now we complain about other things, but we keep complaining.
Exactly.
If things change again, pandemic passes all completely, and we get this 100% clear, we will find something else to complain about, because complaining is a mindset without resignation. There's no
Exactly.
lack of resignation. So complaining is our I would say our tool to show that we have not yet resigned, per se.
Exactly. Which that's why I think the mentors were like, reread the book, everybody, because we haven't learned 2 years of the pandemic,
Yeah.
and we're still hearing things like, oh, I can't wait for things to be back to normal, right? I can't wait. And then God is like, okay, you haven't learned the lesson at all. So, and so that's why the theme of resignation is very personal to each one of us. We need, each one of us have to really analyze, where are we off track? What are the points that makes us deviate from God's law? And why would we do that? The reason is pain, because when we are off God's law, it hurts. So we don't want to be there. We
That's
want
the
to be,
light on the dashboard.
yeah, we don't want all the alarm bells ringing, like, you're totally off track. So it's important for us to always come back, think of our alignment with God, and we know more than anybody else. We are the best person to know ourselves. Now, a lot of inner reflection, just a whole lot.
Yeah. Yeah, this thing about resignation always brings me you were saying in the beginning, the idea of suffering associated with it because of the level of moral advancement that we are. And usually when we suffer, we rebel. And it
Yes.
should be exactly the other way around. I'm suffering. Okay, stop. Why am I suffering? Rebelling is not going to do anything good, because it's not going to bring any benefit. It's just an energy that stays around on our minds, our heads, our, surrounding, and it doesn't take us anywhere.
Yeah.
Rebellion doesn't take us anywhere. You know, like St. Augustine said, suffer well, understand, and surrender to whatever we have to surrender to. And it's different for each one of us. We have different things that we have to surrender to. And but that's, I think, that's the idea behind resignation.
Yeah. And of course, Luis, you're an expert on all this, but we know in Spiritism what happens behind the scenes when we are rebellious, right? The
Mhm.
picture on, the other side is not that great for us. We are attracting spirits that are also rebellious. We're attracting spirits that don't want to do the good.
That's right.
So we are hurting ourselves when we are doing that. Nobody is. God definitely didn't plan that for us. You know, our dear Jesus definitely wishes that we were on the right path. But if we're going to be rebellious, action and reaction, there
Yeah.
will be consequences.
There will be nasty consequences. Yeah.
And we can't avoid that conversation in Spiritism. That is all about Spiritism. We understand the communication between the two worlds. So we know very well our choices.
Yeah. The more we understand resignation, the less likely we are going to suffer,
I
because
agree with that.
it's a balance.
Yes, I agree 100%. But here we are, incarnated on planet Earth at this very time, which tells us we are yet to learn.
Yeah. On the gospel, there's just a phrase. I'm just going to read it to the audience. When Allan Kardec is talking about blessed are the afflicted, he comes and says this. This is how we should understand. You should consider yourselves fortunate to suffer, because your pains in this world are the debt of your past wrongs, and we are having the opportunity to deal with them. And then it brings me to the next thing, which is, if I had to make a list, or some sort of computational analysis of all my wrongdoings, it would be so many and so bad, and some of them horrific, that if I had to pay all in one life, I wouldn't be able to live. I wouldn't last 5 minutes as a living being, because of all the wrongdoings that I would have to offset. So God lets us pay in installments, little by little, as we can. Each installment is called an incarnation. So we pay a little bit on this incarnation, a little bit on the other one, then a little bit. The problem is, each incarnation, we usually accumulate more debt. So, but we, by divine, mercy, we have this opportunity to pay in installments at my own pace. That
Yes.
I decide myself. That's free will, right? I decide myself. So
And by divine mercy, we don't remember our wrongdoings,
correct.
because that would be too much of a burden. And God knows that we can't handle the real truth of the past.
Yeah, that would be impossible.
Yeah. And for, I know we're approaching the end, but for us, also in the gospel, the last line I want to highlight, it says, in blessed are the meek and the peace loving, it says, obedience is the consent of reason, resignation is the consent of the heart. So we can follow the laws because our reason tells us we have to do things, and that's how we live in society. There are laws for us to comply, and most of us are obedient to it.
Mhm.
But resignation, different than obedience, comes from the heart. So that's for us to, approach the theme of resignation. It is about our feelings, our emotions, and how we are connecting with God, and truly aligning with it. If it's, it comes from within. That's the bottom line for us.
From within.
Resignation is from within.
That's what it is. Resignation comes from within.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, we're out of time, but it's such a vast topic. So you following us here in the audience, thanks, Herminio, Franklin, and Wallace, for participating with us. This is going to be recorded. This is being recorded, so it's going to be available offline after we finish the live here. You can always get it at Kardec Radio or Spiritism: A Closer Look on our Facebook page. And Palloma, What a great team. I just wanted to thank you so much for accepting the invitation, bringing such an important and I would be challenging topic to talk about, because not everybody understands the same way. So it becomes at times a little bit challenging, especially outside Spiritism.
Absolutely. And that's why Spiritism is the promise consoler. It brings to us new light to help explain our old problems.
Oh yeah, that's right.
How it is.
Oh my God. And so we're gonna close now. If you're in the audience, if you have a topic that you would like us to take a closer look at, just read the bottom here. Just go to kardecradio.com and you can fill out the form requesting a topic or a subject, and we'll bring it to you. I have help. I have friends that can help you. Palloma is one of them, and we will always be here because we're all learning anyway. Anything that we bring to the table is it's learning. It's a learning process for everyone. So it's always good. There are, I mean, I think that's very clear in Spiritism. There are no subjects to be avoided in Spiritism. Everything, we talk about everything and anything. Okay, so Palloma, thank you so much once again for
Thank
being
you.
with us tonight and taking a closer look at Resignation. And we will be here next week, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks so much and be well.